why was I trying to grow this sports company to 100 million? That was our vision, by the way. When we were at $10 million with the sports company, I said, we are going to 100 million in 5 years. Let's go. This is
Yeah,
what we're doing.
this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, let's go. We're going to go to 100 million in 5 years, right? And it got everybody excited. You know, there's a few people going, how are we going to do that, John? I don't know. Let's go, right? Yeah. And we got halfway there when this situation happened, right? So it felt like we were heading in the right direction. But the question is, why? Why were we going to 100 million? What was I trying to accomplish? And for me, I just had this vision of I want to grow something big and successful. But why was I doing it? And just put it from the perspective as an entrepreneur, right? Just think about this for a second. As I was growing the business and bringing on more and more capital, my equity was going down and down and down. And so I was owning less and less of this thing that I was growing. And so in this moment of failure and self-reflection and what is going on, I had always heard from mentors and people a few years older than me that mentored me, hey, John, at some point you're going to figure out what your purpose is. And I'm like, yeah, I know what my purpose is. My purpose is to grow businesses. Let's go. Like, you know,
To be successful with how you define success at that moment in your life, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. I was like, I know what my purpose is. My purpose is to grow this business and have fun with my family. And, you know, I just couldn't figure it out.
Hello, and welcome to the Generate Your Value podcast. I'm your co-host, Andy McDowell, founder and owner of Generate Your Value, providing self-leadership, leadership, and business coaching services for corporate executives and business owners.
And I'm Zach Levy, your other co-host. I run a nationwide financial service business with my wife, Megan.
Together, Zach and I have the intention to bring you tips, concepts, ideas, suggestions, stories, and analogies from A to Z, which will help you to grow your personal brand and leadership skills in such a way that joy, happiness, and success, as you define it for yourself, are achieved.
We hope to use our gifts, talents, and experiences in business and leadership to generate value in your life. And with that being said, let's move to our topic for today.
Hello, and welcome to the Generate Your Value podcast. My name is Andy McDowell, one of your co-hosts. Unfortunately, my partner in crime, Zach Levy, won't be joining us today, but I think you're going to get a big kick out of this conversation. I'm bringing in a guest today who I had the great pleasure of being on his podcast with his co-host, Rich Hoffman, Entrepreneurs United podcast. It was such a great conversation that when we stopped and got into the green room, I'm like, okay, you got to come on to mine to continue this this conversation. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. My guest is John St. Pierre. Just came out with a new book, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. But let me read his bio, then we'll bring in John for the conversation. So John St. Pierre is an accomplished entrepreneur with an incredible depth of experience from both significant failures and successes. John has co-founded and led two companies he built and scaled to over $50 million in global revenues, one of which he lost dramatically, which we'll talk a little bit about, while the other grew to $100 million plus by implementing his entrepreneurial learnings from the failure, the first go-round. Empowering others on the Entrepreneurs United podcast, which I mentioned with his co-host Rich Hoffman. John is a trusted investor, speaker, and mentor to many entrepreneurs in the business world today. So, John, great to see you again.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming onto my podcast so we can continue the great conversation that you, Rich, and I had earlier. So, as I was telling you in the green room, love stories and storytelling. I think it's just a great, effective tool in leadership. So I always like to start off the conversations with a story, right? So can you tell your life story and how you got into entrepreneurship for our listening audience?
Yeah, to start right there, Andy. Thanks for having me. You know, as an entrepreneur, growing up, not as an entrepreneur growing up, but as a kid growing up, my first experience of tasting entrepreneurism was chocolate bar sales for fundraising. My school was trying to raise some money, and you had to go sell chocolate bars. And so we'd go start knocking on my neighbor, and the neighbors knew me. So here, little Johnny, I'll buy a chocolate bar from you. That works well. But as I started getting further and further away from my home, the chocolate bar sales got harder and harder and harder because people didn't know who I was. Just this kid knocking on the door. And one day, my friend and I, my best friend and I, Steve, had an epiphany. And the epiphany was my father was a professor at the Royal Military College, and they had all these cadets in dorms. And he would go grade some assignments at night. And one night I was like, hey, why don't we go with him? We'll get through the security because we're with my dad. He's a professor. And we'll run through the dorms and go sell chocolate bars. And we went there with like a box or two each. And within like 10 minutes, we were sold out. We would just go knock on one door, and there'd be two cadets in the room, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, chocolate? Like, they don't get access to that kind of stuff there. And we'd go, a few more steps, knock on another door, and the next day we showed up at school, and we're like, hey, give us some more boxes. And Steve and I ended up winning the chocolate bar sales fundraising competition at our school, and it just triggered like, okay, what else can we do? I learned this early concept of supply and demand with the chocolate bars and the cadets, and started doing landscaping jobs, painting jobs, any odds and ends. We started dreaming big about what we could do in this world of business. And that ultimately, Andy, led me to, this was in Montreal. I was born in Canada and grew up in the South Shore of Montreal. And I started getting, living close to the border, watching all these American TV shows and really glamorizing this whole idea of capitalism and what's going on, and ultimately led me to come down to the United States, go to college, get an accounting degree, and really chase the American dream of building a business of value. And that's the beginning of my journey.
Yeah, so what do you think were some of the expectations you had at that time, right? Going down to the United States, getting an accounting degree, I'm going to get into business, and you had certain expectations. What expectations didn't show up for you, and what were some of the things that surprised you about entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, I truly bought it hook, line, and sinker that, America was a land of opportunity. You could really create anything if you really just work at it and go hard at it. And so as I started having some early success when I was in college, interesting thing happened to me, Andy. When I was in college as a Canadian student, I had an international student visa. Well, an international student visa does not allow you to go work at the bar down the street and get paid on W-2 payroll. You're not on a work visa. You have a student visa.
Yep.
And so my father actually forced me to take accounting classes. I was just going to take general business. He's like, no, if you're going down there, you got to specialize in something really, important. So he pushed me into accounting. And so my options were, get a job at an accounting internship and not really get paid, because I could do that, or go back to Canada for the summer. So the first summer I went back to Northern Ontario, 6 hours north of civilization, and went planting trees. And I don't know if you ever heard about anybody going to plant trees, but it's horrible. It's a very tough job. You get 10 cents a tree, and you're wearing nets for flies and everything else. And the next summer I was like, no, this isn't going to work. I got to figure this out. And I saw a poster in my dorm room wall, and it said, own your own painting franchise with College Pro Painters. I'm like, that's interesting. And sure enough, what I came to find out is that international people that are here legally in the United States can actually own a business without, so you can own an LLC. If you're not going through payroll. And so I basically got a College Pro franchise, became my own LLC owner at the age of 21 or so, and ran my own college painting business as a college student. Now, I didn't really know how to paint. That was a different story, but College Pro trained college students on how to run these businesses, and that was just another taste. And so when I got another taste of entrepreneurship, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really interesting. I can actually hire my college student friends to paint the houses, and I can go around and do sales and marketing, and I learned all these different aspects about business, and I really believe that, the sky was the limit.
So that's how you got your first taste. What was it that surprised you that you weren't expecting when you went into? So you didn't know how to paint, right? So I don't know how to paint. I don't know how to do the work, or I found it to be harder than it was.
Yeah.
But when it came to the nuts and bolts of running a business, and I imagine you're juggling this with taking classes and so forth at the same time. So now you got a time management issue. What?
Oh my gosh, Andy. Running a College Pro painting franchise in your first year is the hardest thing a student could possibly do.
Yeah.
And the ups and downs of, oh my gosh, my painter's got to get paid, but the homeowner hasn't paid me yet, and Sherwin-Williams wants their check, and what is going on? I got to go do some more sales, get some more estimates, create some more cash flow. You start going through this transition curve, and so one of the things I talk about in the book as well is just this transition curve. You know, when you start off at uninformed optimism, you're so excited. This is so exciting. I got my own painting business. I can hire college students, and you start coming down this curve into uninformed pessimism and valley of despair and crisis of meaning. Well, I found myself in that crisis of meaning at one point in my first summer where I didn't think I was going to survive. I had payroll, I had supplier bills, my painters wanted to get paid, and it's kind of like the growth paradox. The only way to get out of it is go sell more paint jobs, create more estimates. And by the way, that's why you should never pay a contractor till the job is done, right? Because I kept running around just trying to solve the problem, and I got myself in a position where I had to drive back home, took my little red Ford Escort, had my ladder rack on top and everything, and drove back home to Montreal and had to go confront my father. And it was very difficult because my father's a pretty stern man, and I had to ask him for some help. I had to ask him for a small loan, $5,000
For the
loan
cash
to
flow.
bail myself out. Cash flow. And it was a very hard lesson. He made me sign a loan document. I thought he was just going to help me out. You know, I signed my loan document with interest and everything else. And I promised I'd pay him back by the end of the summer and that I would never, ever, ever ask him for money again. And that was a very hard lesson. Ultimately survived, but learned a lot.
Yeah. Well, which I'm sure later in the conversation with your other businesses, get into capital and startup capital and those type things come into play for you in your book.
Yeah.
So,
big time.
If I remember our conversation right on your podcast, you started a business with some buddies in the sports business, and was that what you did after you got out of college? And did you sell the painting franchise, or did you just close it, or what?
Yeah, so with college pro painters, you don't actually sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll connect the dots real quick, and then we can go through wherever you want to go. But I ran a college pro painting franchise for 2 years. I then, College Pro, ended up sponsoring my work visa to go work for them as a general manager, because I had really developed some unique skills on how to manage franchisees. Yeah. So I moved out to the Midwest, was a College Pro general manager for 2 years, hiring college students and teaching them how to run a business. And then in the late 90s, a bunch of College Pro GMs started out a .com company connecting contractors with homeowners. It was called handymanonline.com. We got venture funded out of Silicon Valley. We were growing the company like crazy. And then the 2000 crash happened. And we ended up selling all of our assets of Handyman Online to Service Magic, or the bank did, ultimately. Service Magic became HomeAdvisor.com. HomeAdvisor.com merged with Angie. That's now Angie.com. Yep. That was our business that we lost during the crash. And that was my first awakening to, maybe this business thing isn't as easy as I thought, moment. But then in 2003, I started a project management company, staying with my contracting lane. I was like, how do I hook up contractors with commercial projects? So I started a contracting business. And then I was still very passionate about sports and the sport of ice hockey. And a couple of best friends and I started a sports business for youth sports, running events and camps and tours to Europe and such. So I started these two businesses in 2003, and they both started growing. And the sports business, a few years later, 15 years later, we had grown to north of $50 million in global revenues. And so I was spending all of my time on that business, not on this contracting business. And we brought on some private equity capital. 7 months later, I was fired from the company that we had founded and grew and lost everything. Meanwhile, I still had the little project management company that was over here that was still chugging along, and had to lick my wounds, figure out the learnings, and then took those learnings, applied it to the project management company. What I failed over here, I applied it over here, and we successfully grew that company to north of $100 million the right way. And so all those learnings were all, culminated into the lessons that I had to apply to not make the same mistakes I'd made before.
Yeah. So what was running through your head when you got fired? I mean, that's I've been fired a couple times in my life, as well as laid off, and I know it's not a fun experience, but I've never had the opportunity to be fired from a company that I built. So very painful. And it's painful for a lot of reasons, Andy.
this was my heart and soul. I had the logo tattooed on my forehead. My kids had all the apparel of the bit. Like this was my identity. It wasn't just a company I worked for, right? And all my best friends worked in the business. Yeah, it was very, very painful. And I put myself ultimately in a very vulnerable position by making some mistakes in terms of how to grow a business the right way versus too aggressively, too carelessly, too quickly, needing too much capital, diluting yourself. I mean, there's a lot of lessons that go in there. But obviously, I'll never forget that day in the boardroom when the private equity investors said, "Hey, you're out. We're putting someone else in your seat." And the calling of my wife and going, I just got let go from the very company I put everything into, and having to come home and see my two boys and be like, oh my gosh, well, now what? So it's a very devastating moment. As we all know, there's a silver lining of this story, but and you hear a lot, failures are prerequisite for success and all this kind of stuff. And although I believe all of that in the moment, it's not very fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to have to develop a mindset to say that your failures are your opportunities, and it's easy to say, but I can immediately go back to my own emotions when I was fired the first time.
Yeah.
How much I was beating myself up and so forth. When you're in the middle of those emotions, it's very difficult, even though your brain is saying, okay, here's an opportunity to go maybe do something that's even better or greater. For a while, it's a grieving process, right? We all know about the grieving process and how many emotions or phases that you're going through. I'm watching my father go through that right now after we lost our mom this past Thanksgiving. And it's not fun to watch from that perspective. So you fell off your horse, so to speak, with that particular company. What'd you do to dust yourself off? Where was your head at? What kind of process did you use to sort of pull yourself up by the bootstraps, as they say, and go over to the other company and keep going?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. And before I answer it, my deepest sympathies for your loss and your family.
Thanks.
I'm sure that was very tough.
Yeah.
In the midst of the failure, it's a little bit of what just happened. It's a little bit of trying to be strong to my family and my wife and my kids, and I can be resilient and that big chest popping out and go, no, I'm fine. I'm good, right? But I think at the deep root of it, Andy, for me, it was two things that really, really, really guided me. One was perspective, that I think we lose a lot. And two was introspection. What were my contributions to the situation, as opposed to look what somebody just did to me. Those two really helped me a lot. And I think, when entrepreneurs get themselves in a position where they're stressed out about their business or things aren't really going as well as they thought they were going to be, or whatever it may be, perspective is big, right? Because you lament what's going on in your business, but think about people who may have literally lost their business or lost a family member or in the hospitals dying of some disease, or even in Europe right now and some of the things that are going on over there. And so when you think about all of that and you then think about your life, you're like, okay, this sucks, but it's not as bad as the way people are experiencing things across the world. I have my health, I have my family, I have my kids, I have my situation. So that perspective just kind of lays a groundwork for stop feeling so sorry for yourself. This isn't the end of the world. Then the introspection thing becomes more intellectual as you start thinking. And I started journaling. I had never really journaled ever. I started journaling and just writing down what is going on. What is happening in my head? What did I do? What would I have done differently? If I had to reverse the clock, what would I have done differently? And when I married those two, perspective and introspection, I was able to kind of advance. Okay, now what? Now where do I want to go? How do I generate my value?
Right.
Which is a whole other conversation we can get into that really connects with you. But how do I generate my value to this world? Where am I going next? What am I going to do? But that was it for me, perspective and introspection.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to be a leader when you've got things going on in your own life, right? Some of my hardest times when my time at Boeing was going through 2 divorces and having to stand up in front of my team and keep the business going, and trying to stay focused with things when things back home are just in a terrible state. And that's where your mind is, it's where your heart is, trying to deal with that stuff. But yet, for your employment, for your career, and for those things, you have to kind of compartmentalize, if you will, those things and put them off to the side and try to be in the moment with your team, and deal with whatever business issues you need to deal with while that's going on. Very, very difficult part of my career, and I have to imagine it was the same for you. Probably filled with some self-doubt and so forth, trying to take those first steps in your other business and start integrating those lessons learned and hoping for the best that we can keep this one going and see improved results from the integration of the lessons learned.
Yeah, no doubt. And that kind of goes back to that introspection part, right? Like, okay, how am I going to take this message that's humbling me, and what am I going to do with it? It's a very important thing for people to do in life. And to your point, when things aren't aligned, whatever the misalignment may be, whether it be a situation at home, or you're not getting along with people at work, or your business is going exactly where you are, it's that moment of just reflection that I think is really, really important, that people just don't take enough time to do. They just keep going. And that was kind of when things weren't going well in my business. I just kept selling more paint jobs. As going back to my college example, like, okay, let me go sell some more paint jobs to get myself out of this thing, as opposed to sitting back and going, okay, let me reflect, let me journal, let me get some deep thought into this. And I think that's where the best stuff happens. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the mindset piece, because what I heard you say, and I think this is where people get into trouble with this kind of events and transitions per se, is the mindset, right? So I've just had something really bad happen to me. And so is my focus, my mindset going to be outside of myself, and what is the world doing that's screwing me over? Or is it internally focused and saying, okay, what part of what just happened am I going to own, and be introspective and work on myself, and what that are in my control, or what things are out of my control, and I'm just going to let them wash away, right? How big of a impact was that kind of mindset for you, do you think, in that journey?
Yeah, it was massive, and it came from the earlier learnings as a college pro franchisee. Like, you can only control what you can control, whether it be sports or business. You can't control the referee's call. You can only control your reaction to it, or how you're gonna move forward with it. And there are a lot, Andy, as you know, unfortunately, people who externalize the problems. It's not me, it's them. It's not me, it's this situation. And I think the reality is, as an entrepreneur, what I learned early on is, if I want to grow and I want to develop, I always got to put the mirror back up at me, because ultimately, as the CEO of a business, or this coach of a team, or general manager of a team, at the end of the day, all decisions kind of point back to something you should have done differently, or did the right way, or whatever it may be. And so in my scenario, although I was not happy with what took place from an emotional perspective, and there were some things that happened that I didn't think were right, from a moral perspective or a principle perspective, I couldn't control it. That's what happened. So the only thing I could control to advance myself in my life were the factors that I contributed to. And that deep thought of, okay, what would I have done differently? How can I introspectively, versus externalizing the situation, introspectively look at things, is the only way to advance in life. Regardless of the situation of you're in, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, just in life, it's the only way to do things in order to take that next step. And when I go back to that transition learning curve that I talked about, right? When you're in that valley of despair, of, oh gosh, what do I need to do? And you're trying to get back up the curve to informed optimism. Well, the only way to get there is to digest the learnings and have a lot of clarity on what you're going to do about it, right? Because there's an acronym, CTFAR, that we use, right? When there's a circumstance, which is the C, it creates thoughts, and those thoughts create feelings, and the feelings create actions, and the actions create your results. So if the circumstance happens, okay, just got let go from this company I built for 15 years, over $50 million, pretty big circumstance, but it's factual. That's a undisputed fact. That is what happened. Then I have thoughts about it. Well, the thoughts are this sucks. I wish this didn't happen. Whatever. Those lead to feelings, and the feelings is where it gets really tricky, because the feelings could be, I can't believe this happened to me. I'm going to go into my shell. That, or it's, what did I learn from this? What's going on? And then so those feelings start changing the actions you're now going to take. And if you take the appropriate actions, you'll get better results and you'll move up the curve. If you take the wrong actions, you'll get worse results, and you start heading back down further into that crisis of meaning, valley of despair area. So that CT-FAR acronym really worked for me in that instance. Was really digesting my thoughts, my feelings, my actions, which will lead to my results.
Yeah. So last week I listened to the episode that you and Rich did about your book, and your journey. What I took away from it was something that I coach a lot with my clients is I use a model called be, do, have. Right? And when I was listening to your words about your journey going from the $50 million firing over to the $100 million plus growth, is that I think you went, and correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of went on this journey of you're always do kind of piece, and then you went into this introspection in that transformation and started working on the be, right? To get that alignment of what's my mission, what's my purpose, my why in life, how did I get myself here? And I know this because I went through it myself from the divorces, right? I was in the middle of a really bad second marriage and sat there, and we may have talked about this when I was a guest on your podcast, but I shut the door and okay, this is not the life I want for myself. What the heck do I need to do to get myself into a better place in life? And that started my journey out of the do and into the be from that perspective. And that's the same kind of thing I heard in your discussion with Rich on that episode, was that you sat down and was introspective after that. I hate to use the word failure because it really wasn't a failure. It was a bump in the road because of the way that you approached it, that you did a lot of self-discovery in that and saying, okay, I need to kind of align what I'm doing here with who I truly am in the world. Would that be a fair takeaway for myself from your episode with Rich on that in your journey?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, first off, I would call it a failure personally. I appreciate the roadblock, but it was a failure, and I'm not afraid to say that. I think it just was. But it's through those failures that you learn, and through those challenges that you learn. But a wise man once shared this quote with me from Albert Einstein: "Rather be a man of success, be a man of value."
That's where my company name came from. That's my favorite quote in the whole world. It's my
exactly. Well, you're the wise man who shared that quote with me.
It's my mantra.
Yep. Yeah. Well, you shared that quote on our podcast, and I had never heard that quote before, by the way, until you shared it. But that's what I went through. Mm-hmm. So, in the moment of this failure, I took some time and I started thinking and I started journaling, as I mentioned before. And one of the things I discovered, Andy, was why was I trying to grow this sports company to $100 million? That was our vision, by the way. When we were at $10 million with the sports company, I said, we are going to $100 million in 5 years. Let's go.
Yeah,
this is what we're doing.
This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, let's go. We're going to go to $100 million in 5 years, right? And it got everybody excited. There's a few people going, how are we going to do that, John? I don't know. Let's go, right? Yeah. And we got halfway there. When this situation happened, right? So it felt like we were heading in the right direction, but the question is why? Why were we going to 100 million? What was I trying to accomplish? And for me, I just had this vision of I want to grow something big and successful. But why was I doing it? And just put it from the perspective as an entrepreneur, right? Just think about this for a second. As I was growing the business and bringing on more and more capital, my equity was going down and down and down. And so I was owning less and less of this thing that I was growing. And so in this moment of failure and self-reflection and what is going on, I had always heard from mentors and people a few years older than me that mentored me, hey, John, at some point you're going to figure out what your purpose is. And I'm like, yeah, I know what my purpose is. My purpose is to grow businesses. Let's go. Like,
To be
I couldn't hear what
successful
they were.
with how you define success at that moment in your life, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand what they were talking about. I was like, I know what my purpose is. My purpose is to grow this business and have fun with my family. And, I just couldn't figure it out. But what I discovered was that what I was trying to grow in this business was completely disconnected with what I actually wanted in my life. I was trying to create wealth and freedom. Well, you don't create wealth and freedom through growing a business you own less and less and less and less of and lose control over and lose. That's not the way it works.
Right.
And I couldn't connect those dots. And so during this moment of self-reflection and deep thought, the question was, well, what's my purpose beyond me? What am I trying to do here? Like ultimately in life, what am I trying to do? Forget about entrepreneurship. In life, what is my true north life plan? What do I want in the next 30 years of my life? Now let me back that back to, okay, well, what do I need to have for a business? Do I need a $100 million business that I own 5% of? Or do I need a smaller business that I own more of? Or what do I actually need to accomplish my true north life plan? And so for the first time ever, I really identified what I wanted in my life and all these different segments of my life, not just business, but family, health, spirituality, relationships, medical, everything. And then I aligned it with my business plan. And for the first time ever, my life plan and my business plans were aligned.
Well, could you even say they were in some ways overlapped?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's my mission with my business, is to get people to understand how much life and business overlaps.
They have to. Everything, in a way, everything overlaps. Your health overlaps to your business.
Well, from the way that you go after a business and run it, but also even from a construct basis, there's a ton of overlap between business and life. I don't think a lot of people realize or don't take the time to think about it.
Well, that's exactly my point, Andy. Is I was just running for the sake of running. I was growing for the sake of growing. It had no connection. I mean, I was fulfilled in my life because I was growing something, but it really didn't connect with my goals in life. And once I aligned those two, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. And how many entrepreneurs, to your point, just keep running and running and running, and they get caught in this growth paradox. And then they're working 80 hours a week. They're stressed out. They're not spending enough time with their family. Their relationships are getting, they're not seeing their friends enough. Their health goes to crap. And then they wake up one day and like, what just happened? Is this really what I want in life?
Yes. So with your experience in business now, what would you say is the importance of a why to your life and to your business, and the alignment between the two?
It's everything. Simon Sinek, start with why. I'm a big, not only just think about this, Andy. I used to sit down with our executive teams every year around Q4 of every year for our strategic business planning session. And I would play Simon Sinek Start With Why video that's on YouTube. It's got millions of views. It's not how you do it or what you do, it's why you do it, and what's our why as a business. And we come up with our strategic plan for our business, and it'll all be laid out what we're going to do in the next 10 years and everything else. I never did that for myself. I did it for my business, never for myself. That's totally disconnected. You got to actually know what you want for yourself first before you design your strategic business plan, because they need to connect. Yeah,
because you need that. I call it the oak tree, right? When things are going up and down in the business, you need that why, that purpose, as an oak tree to kind of hang on to while you're going through the ups and downs and valleys of the business, with some things that are in your control and some things that are out of your control.
That's right.
So let's talk a little bit about the book. The name of the book is $100 Million Journey, Your Guide to Growing the Business of Your Dreams Without Driving It Off the Cliff. Let's talk about the why, how, what, if you will, of it. As somebody's in the middle of the process, I'm editing my book at the moment. I'm curious about your experience. So let's start with the why. Why the book?
Yeah.
Why it just in general, the why of the book, and why now?
Well, it connects back to my why, ultimately. We just started full discussion, and I'm holding here the $100 Million Journey. It just came out on Amazon, and this is the why, right? When I start reflecting on what is my purpose beyond myself. Yes, I have some goals for myself and what I want to achieve, but ultimately what drives me, what's my passion? And Jim Collins has his hedgehog concept, what success looks like, right? It's what are you most passionate about? What can you be the best in the world at? And what can drive your economic engine? When you live in the intersection of those three circles, the Venn diagram, that's where success lives. And for me, I've always loved entrepreneurship. I always loved working with entrepreneurs. I always loved coaching entrepreneurs and helping them achieve their goals. But I had a little bit of a situation here. I had just had a massive failure. And I had to really get those learnings from it. Not only get the learnings, but then apply it to a business and actually make that business drive and succeed and get it to where it needed to be to prove that these principles are correct. And so in doing so, as that project management company started achieving the success that the principles were helping it execute, I said, you know what, I got to get this message out. I really want to help entrepreneurs never make the same mistakes that I've made and really connect with them on these principles. And it's almost a do this, not that book, because if you don't apply these 7 principles of entrepreneurial success, you will potentially put yourself in a position to experience a massive failure like I did. And if you do, you can actually protect yourself and build a business the right way. And so that's really the mission of this book, is to really help entrepreneurs see themselves in my story and connect with some of these principles and go, we got to make a correction here because we're heading down the wrong path. And so, my mission now in life is to help others achieve their dreams without falling off the cliff, without creating these fatal mistakes that we control to a large degree.
Yeah, so I was kind of chuckling to myself when you were talking about this piece in your conversation with Rich, because I've joked with some folks how much I wish my 2 kids had USB ports in their head where I could take all of my failures and all of my experiences and so forth and just plug it into their USB port and just download all that information, the logical side of it, the emotional side of it, the spiritual side of it, so that they wouldn't have to go through that, the same pains and experiences that I went through, in hopes that they get to a state of joy, happiness, success a lot quicker than I did for myself. How do you I get a little deep here. How do you feel about that? Right? I mean, how important is it for experience for people? I mean, it's one thing for you to sit down and want to help people to generate value in the world by writing this book. It's going to help folks, but what is the power of experience, do you think, for human beings?
I think it's necessary. It's a component of life. And the example you just gave about your kids and putting a USB port in the back of their heads, and it's a great idea. And the reality is, if we were able to do that, if we just kind of role play that for a minute, they probably wouldn't make the mistakes we made potentially, but they'd make others.
Right.
And the reality is that's life. And life is full of those obstacles and challenges. That's the simulation we're in, right? It's kind of like, how do you overcome this game to get to the next game or the next level? I mean, when you just put it in a gaming perspective, the reality is we live in this life that has these challenges, and they're meant to be there. Versus, there's a lot of talk right now about, everybody gets a medal, and are you really working for it? Are you overcoming these adversity and challenges? And what's the importance of that? What's the importance of overcoming adversity and challenges, especially when you're young, so that you can learn how to overcome them when you get a little bit older and help others through it? And so to me, that's really a life lesson that makes life more enjoyable. And now that you say that, and then people are stressed out to the max and they're unhealthy and they're not doing well with situations, I get it. But as you experience these challenges and you overcome them, you're feeling that, if I can do this, I can do anything. I can overcome really any situation. Is so powerful.
Yeah, so this book really gets to the heart of the matter between the different, people ask me, what's the difference between consulting and coaching? Consulting tends to lean towards, well, I'm going to come in, look around, and provide you some answers, kind of the blueprint. Whereas coaching, you're sharing your experiences and your thoughts. This book is really a way to, in essence, help coach somebody without you being physically in the room or on a Zoom call or whatever with this person, is to say, I'm going to plant some ideas in your head. I'm going to share you how I came to develop these seeds of thought, if you will, through my own experiences. I'm going to share those experiences with you. But the reality is, you've got to take this info in this book and integrate it or apply it to your own situation, to your own life. That's the work you have to do. This is not giving you a blueprint. This is not go do step 1, go do step 2, go do step 3, exactly as I state here. It's more of, here's an idea based off of my experiences, and think about it, and how would you apply it to your situation, to your life, to your why, and so forth, and run with it and see where it takes you. Go have that experience. We're not going to eliminate that experience for you. We're hopefully going to make it a more robust experience for you by planting some ideas in your head.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And I think as you look through what you just said there, in life, I've read business books that probably told me not to do some of the things that I did. And so just by reading a book doesn't mean you're obviously going to overcome all these obstacles and not run into any situations. And the reality is, some people may read the book and really not connect with some of the messages, but it just takes one person to connect with one of the messages at the right time from the right person to change someone's life and really help them overcome a challenge that they're facing, or help them build the business of their dreams, or help them not fall off the cliff. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to achieve here.
So let's talk about the how. How was the experience of writing the book for you? I kind of know the answer because I listened to you and Rich talk about it, but for our listening audience here, how was that experience for you?
I had dreamed, years ago about writing a book. Actually, Rich and I talked about writing a book 15, 20 years ago together. And it almost was a distant, I'm not sure if I can do it, perspective. And then I started thinking about writing a book years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, Andy. And I was like, well, what would I write about? Who wants to hear, what do I have to say? It was kind of in my mind, right? Like, do I really have a good story, a good message? And then all of a sudden, boom, this big story kind of happens that I think is pretty compelling. It's an entrepreneurial failure with learnings and lessons that are true and hardcore, and then principles that were actually applied to create a tremendous amount of wealth and value in a business the right way. And so the story kind of developed itself for me where I had to tell it. How can you not tell kind of the story? But it was very difficult. I mean, the process of being vulnerable, to kind of open your chest to the world and go, here's exactly what happened. Here's where I messed up. Here's what I would do differently. The humbling part of that is a very big moment of vulnerability. I wasn't somebody who was always very vulnerable. So that was, a different aspect of myself I had to bring out to the world. And then just kind of crystallizing these in a book that, you don't want it to be too businessy and boring, but you also need to pass through some good learnings. So it's quite the challenge. I had a great publisher that worked with me, Kira Brinton, and at the end of it, you'll see when you're done writing your book, right? When you open that box and you see the book for the first time, the feeling you have of, you know what? Again, if I can do this, I can do anything. Kind of approach, just like somebody who runs a marathon. Right? My co-host Rich ran a triathlon this year. Never in a million years would I thought Rich Hoffman would run a triathlon, but you know what? He did it, and now his mind's like, look, I can do anything. So when you set your mind to something, you're able to achieve it. That's kind of what writing the book did for me. It was kind of give me more confidence that there is a good message here, and it is a good process.
So who would you say the book is for? Who's your target audience?
Yeah. I'm not going to say all entrepreneurs. I think all entrepreneurs may enjoy the story, but who it's specifically targeted for are entrepreneurs that have maybe running their business 5, 10 plus years. Their business is maybe between $5 million and $20 million of revenue. They've established a nice lifestyle business, but they aspire to kind of build a high performance business, a business they don't have to be there and run it every day, a business that can continue to generate passive income for them or generate a good amount of wealth for them on an exit or something of that nature, because the road between a lifestyle business and a high performance business is really rocky. And that's where the messy middle is. That's where the growth paradox all comes
Yeah.
in. That's where cash becomes king. I mean, it's a very difficult spot. And if you're trying to aspire to do that and bringing on investors and diluting yourself, and there's a whole bunch of other things in
Yeah.
there that can be really, really dangerous, that's who the book really, really is
Yeah,
for.
you start diving into the scaling issues to be able to get that revenue high enough to make it more than just a lifestyle. It's always one of the rockiest parts of growing the business. Because
Exactly.
you really got to dive into the processes and how is it that we can duplicate things over and over and over again to bring in the more revenue without having to invest in a ton of capital. Well, our time is coming to a close. Unfortunately, I could feel like you're a kindred spirit. We could sit here and just talk for hours and hours. What's the best way that A, somebody can find your book, but also B, connect with you for any reason, whether it's for coaching, mentoring, or potential partnering in a business, or being a client in your business, or anything of that nature? What's the best way they can reach out?
Yeah, so along with the book, that we have a new website that just came out. It's 100mjourney.com. So 100m is in maryjourney.com, and you can connect with me on social links on that, or on social directly at John St. Pierre 100. And of course, the book is on Amazon as well, and provide free consultations with anybody who would love to chat about their business. Again, back to the mission. Any entrepreneur wants to talk at any time, I'm available and would love to chat with them. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak again. Eddie, you're right. We could probably talk for a very long time. This is a great conversation.
So one last question we ask every guest that comes on our show, and that question is, because we like to see the thread. We like to see where the golden thread is between all the answers. And it's a question I personally had to be very introspective about when I decided to name my business what it is. But what do the words generate your value mean to you?
Yeah, to me, one of the parts that happens too, Andy, when you write a book, is you start thinking about the title of your book and the subtitle of your book, and you go through it 100 million times, right? What should this be? And
in the middle of that.
Yeah, exactly. And the subtitle of my book is the answer. And I really connected with it, which is I want to help entrepreneurs and just people build the life or business of their dreams without making some of the catastrophic mistakes that I've made or that others have made before them, and help guide them in a way, because there is a roadmap. We just don't always know what it is, but you can develop a roadmap if you have the right guidance and coaching and words of wisdom with you. So that's my goal, help people build the business or life of their dreams without falling off the cliff.
So for the listening audience, I hope that you are taking lots of notes and we're gleaming some of our conversation. I feel like John is a living example of a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this podcast in terms of self-leadership and leadership, right? The mindset, how important the mindset is to say that you fell off your horse, you need to get back up, and to be introspective and look internal instead of external and say, okay, what was in my control? What can I learn from this? What can I integrate those lessons to and keep going? And so to a certain extent, I think, John, you're a little bit of a poster child. I hate to use that term, but a poster child for what we talk about on this podcast, and why, when you reached out and said, hey, let's get going on an episode here, I was just like, yes, let's go. Because that was one of the things I took away from my conversation with you and Rich on Entrepreneurs United podcast, which I highly recommend. Go listen to the podcast. There's great guests, great conversations, and a lot of great information that's out there. So, can't thank you enough, the listening audience, for taking that valuable resource that's limited for all of us, called time, to be able to spend it with us on this episode. I hope you got a lot of John McCollum golden nuggets on the podcast of information that you can take away and improve your life somehow, whether it be personal life, business life, career, anything about generating value in this world. So that being said, have a great day, have a great week, and we'll see you here next time on the Generate Your Value podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Generate Your Value podcast. If you find our conversations to be useful in your life, I invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode.
You can find me online at Instagram at _Zach.Levy, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
For information on my coaching services, visit my website at www.generateyourvalue.com. You can also find me and my company on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram. Simply search for Generate Your Value on those platforms.
Once again, thanks for joining us for today's podcast, and we invite you to generate your value in this world.